Is betting the morning line favorite a good long-term strategy at the Kentucky Derby? Find out, trust the profits, fact or fiction. Trust the profits. This is fact or fiction, and today we're going to be talking about whether it makes sense to bet the favorite, right? So, coming up to the Kentucky Derby, we haven't had the post draw yet. We don't know what the morning line odds are. We've got a pretty good idea, though, of who's going to be the favorite. I'm willing to bet that it's going to be Forte, who a lot of people have as being the best horse since Breeders' Cup. And Forte really came onto the scene early on when he defeated Loggins in the Claiborne Futurity. And he hasn't lost since then. He's racked up a number of wins, including BC Juvenile. So he will likely be the morning line favorite, 5-2, 7-2. Don't know what the odds are going to be yet. But does it make sense to bet Forte? So, common thought that you hear among a lot of horse players is don't bet the favorite. You hear about this all the time, especially in large fields. Finding a way to defeat the favorite. Who's going to be the horse that can pick away at the weakness that the favorite has? So, what are some of the theories behind betting against the favorite? So, betting the morning line one in general, and you'll notice my note below. If I say morning line one, that means morning line favorite. Morning line two, we're talking about ranking. So this would be the second favorite in terms of morning line. If I put PT1, PT2, that's post time odds favorite versus post time odds second favorite. Just so you know what I'm talking about when I go through these slides here. So in general, outside of the Derby, right, as I'm tracking all the formula metrics I have and I'm ranking them against the morning line favorite, um, you're looking at a 30% win, 31% win rate across thousands of different types of races for the morning line favorite. However, you're also talking about a negative 15 to 20% return on investment, depending on the size of the race. But on average, it's probably going to be about minus 18% across a wide span of different types of races. So, right there, most horse players will tell you try to find a way to avoid betting it, even though that one horse will win 31% of the time. If you do that repeatedly, if you bet that horse repeatedly, you're going to be losing money. So, taking that theory over into the Kentucky Derby where there's 20 horses running, all things even. If each horse was even, right, 5% chance each one of those horses wins, right? If you're doing the math, 1 out of 25%. But as we all know, some horses are better than others, so they get a little bit of an increase there. That said, out of 20 horses, it's definitely tougher to win a race, even if you are the best. It's also the lowest paying out position. In most cases, morning line one. Post time changes that, but the morning line favorite is not going to move very far off of those odds, most likely. And you're putting a lot of risk in it. You're putting your money into the lowest payout on the board in most cases. The other thing you hear is long shot horses win all the time. And we've seen it, especially in recent history. If you look at the last four Derby winners, let's take a look at them right now. So you got Rich Strike, 30-1 morning line. That was tied for 13th in terms of ranking. Post time, he was dead last, 80-1, 81-1 on average for post. Sorry, if you round up, it's 81-1 post time odds for Rich Strike last year. You look at the year before that, Medina Spirit, the the Bob Baffert horse was 15-1. Morning line morning line rank of 7 in that race, tied with some other horses at 15-1. When he went off at post time, he was ranked 6 at 12.1-1. So pretty good odds on Medina Spirit there. Definitely wasn't the favorite. Authentic was a little bit higher than that, 8-1, tied for third in ranks of morning line. Bet up to 8.4, but still third at post time in terms of rank. Now we go to Country House, 31-1, tied for 12th. At post time, he was ranked 18th in that field there, 65-1. And if you want to talk about maximum security, who actually came in first in that race, he was 10-1 in that race initially at morning line, fourth ranked in terms of those odds. At post time, however, he jumped up to second. So he was 4.5-1 in that race as it went off. Omaha Beach was scratched from that race. He was he was the morning line favorite before that race went off and before he was scratched. So just establishing some common thoughts, some baselines for us before we start diving into the data. And I do want to use this data to back up or to refute these theories that you should or should not be betting the morning line favorite. So let's move on and see what it says here. Going back to the 1970s, we're going back counting 52 races right here at a very high level. This is the highest level we're going to be at right now. 25% win rate. Just purely looking at that win rate there, 25%. 13 morning line favorites have won in those last 52 years. You could see we had a couple decades where we've had zero morning line favorites in the 80s and the 90s. Very strange, especially when you see the 70s had six, 2010s had five, right? So we had a couple where we completely failed. Seven morning line winners since 2000, and 2000 is going to be the date that we stick to here because in looking back on this data, it is a little bit more difficult to gather data previous to 2000. Searching on the internet just to find what the morning line was for a lot of these previous races can be a little bit of a challenge if you're looking to get all the horses and start doing some fun arithmetic exercises with them. The last morning line one winner to win was Justify in 2018. If you notice on my previous slide, I cut off at 2019. Justify was the last one who was the morning line favorite to win. And as I said before, due to availability, going forward, we're going to be looking at the 2000s up to the 2020s. So we'll be looking at 23 lines of data here. And I say 23 because 2000, I know someone out there is going to be like, we've only gone to 2022, so it's only 22 lines of data. No, 2000 is a zero, so it counts as my 23rd piece of data. Got it? Good. With that, since 2000, if you bet the morning line favorite every year for $2, everything being equal across the board, you would have spent $46. You would have won seven times. And in that time, the winnings would have been $55.40, being an ROI of 20%. That's not bad. 20%. I mean, I'm sure all the horse players are out there thinking, I want to double, triple, quadruple my money. This is the Derby we're talking about here. I want to make some payments on my mortgage with this. But being realistic, right? Seven times over 23 years, you're talking about a win rate over that time of 30%. So 30% of the time, that's going to pay out. That's consistent with what I said before. However, the thing to note here is that when you look at the standard race where you're betting a morning line one horse, those odds low. They can get below one. Some of the morning lines start at 6 to 5, and they might get chopped down lower than that. You might be betting on a horse that's 2 to 5 to go off and loses. Even if they win, you're not going to get a huge payment back. But with the Kentucky Derby being what it is, 20 horses being in the field, maybe it gets cut down to 16 or 17 at the least. You're never going to go really that low. Not going to go all that low. You're still going to get some sort of payout coming back. So, hitting 30% over the last 23 years is not that bad. You're going to get a 20% ROI, plus 20% ROI. The other thing to note here is morning line one finishes in the money first, second, third, right? It finishes to show 54% of the time. So if you're going to be placing some sort of other wager, an exacta or a trifecta, it makes sense to put morning line one in there, even though the odds are not as great. So the seven winners that I've got in here, you can see them listed below here. I'm not going to read through them all. I know you're looking at this chart and you see the blue line. That's where your wins are. That adjusts to the left. You can see the seven wins at the top there, and then it starts to fall down below for that. But you're looking at those red bars and thinking, that first red bar, the one that you're trying to sell me on their formula. That one doesn't look as sexy as the ones at the end. But think of it this way, right? They may look sexy, but what we're talking about here with the red bars is you're hitting those once in 23 years if you bet it consistently. If you say I'm going to bet the 12th ranked horse or something like that. The other thing to consider here is a lot of these horses were tied in terms of their morning line ranking, right? So 96 horses over the course of 23 years that make up the 12, 13, 14, and 16. That's not the same as saying, you know, one horse in the first position, 23 times making up all those positions here. So There's a lot of horses that are tied in those positions. If you were to be executing this for me, you'd have to bet multiple multiple horses each year. So we're really focusing in on that one, right? Now, there's another way to look at this. What about the post time favorite? The post time favorite, you're going to remove those ties when you talk about the post time favorite, and you're also talking about public opinion, right? Let's call it the stock market of horses here. What does the public think of these horses? This is even more interesting here, right? If you were to figure out what the post time favorite's going to be, and it locks in just as the horses are about to go off, so it's really impossible to be certain you are getting the post time favorite when you bet. But say you were, you would be talking about hitting instead of 7 out of 23 times, you would be hitting 10 out of 23 times, which is incredible. That's a 43% hit rate. Your ROI, because you're adding in those extra three horses, is going to be 93%. So at the same $46 spend, you're just adjusting it to whatever the post time favorite is now going to be a $46 spend for an 88 and 90 cent return. That's almost doubling your money. 93% ROI. Pretty darn good. Also, that post time one favorite is in the money almost 70% of the time. So a very safe bet to be in your trifecta box. Very safe bet to be in your exacta box as well. Um, so yeah, there's three horses that get added in here. Those three horses, Street Sense, Smarty Jones, Always Dreaming, those were horses that were morning line two, and the public adjusted them up to post time one. That's the key distinction there. Um, so once again, let's look at those long shots there, right? The thing you'll notice here that in terms of ranking, the consistency here, if you're going to say I'm going to bet like a specific odds rank, right? The one is for certain the best. It takes almost half of the pegs, and there's really only two areas that even hit two, right? If you bet the 6 and the 9, and then there's a bunch of ones and a whole bunch of zeros. So in terms of consistency, you're talking about like minuscule percentages, 4% of the time. If I wanted to bet, say like the 20 horse, right? It hit once. It was rich strike. um, 4% of the time, you're going to be right if you go that route in 23 years. And if you do, it's going to be a great payoff, right? As you can see by that bar. But when's the next time you're going to be waiting for that to happen? So, not a very good strategy. All right. So, where are we at on this? In conclusion, so betting the morning line favorite year after year has proven to be a viable strategy. Believe it or not, the numbers the numbers say if you've done it since 2000, it would yield you a plus 20% return on investment, winning 30% of the time. Better yet, if you were able to bet the post time favorite every year, it would be even better. 43% of the time you'd be hitting plus 90% ROI. I mean, if you can figure that out, if you can figure out what the post time favorite's going to be, if you can wait till that last minute and really say, okay, it's going to be that one over the last 23 years, that's also been a very good strategy, a better strategy. Now, I realize I'm cherry picking a little bit because the data's been good since 2000. But if I were to go back to the 70s, right, and I were to readjust these, figuring out post time, I don't know what that would be. But if we were to look at the morning line, because we had that huge glut in the 80s and 90s where no one was able to set the odds right on the horses, we'd be spending an extra 60 and only making 35. So you're losing almost half your money um, in that 30-year stretch that I didn't include here. So let's throw that in there. But let's also consider this. Have times changed? I mean, there's a reason we're looking at the sampling here. Number one, the data is better, but also the data in general is better across the board. We've got better data to know how these horses have been performing. Odds makers have better data in terms of knowing how to set the lines. I mean, we're still getting upsets. Don't get me wrong. We saw what it looked like the past 4 years, but I feel like the data is better out there. We've got certain trainers who have been very consistent. So there's probably something to what's happening in the last 20 years that didn't happen in the 80s. It didn't happen in the 90s. Um, Finally, yes, I know. I'm promoting this guy, Chalk Eater. He's our best friend, isn't he? Yeah, Chalk Eater. At least during this podcast, this recording, he's our best friend. But finally, big money can be had on longs. I mean, this is the reason we're into handicapping, right? Is because you're trying to take a look and see where the value can be had. Value, value, value. That's what we talk about. And I know the comment section will be blowing up telling me what's the purpose of all this if we're just going to all bet the morning line favorite. All I'm saying here is if you use that strategy over the past 20 years, you'd be making a profit. There's definitely money to be had if you can take a look at the race holistically and find that winner in there, right? If you can go year to year and pinpoint that winner out of all the horses. But what I'm saying is the morning line favorite shouldn't always be overlooked and shouldn't always be ignored. Anyway, that's all I have right now. Fact or fiction. Um, Betting against the morning line favorite, always avoiding the morning line favorite or the post time favorite. I would say it's fiction. You should always, always consider it. Try to beat it if you can. See if you can find that value out there. But if you can't, there's no harm in betting them. That's all I got. Hit me up in the comments section. Let me know how much you hate this. And hit the subscribe button. Best luck at the Derby.